water?
Water is better.
Water.
Okay. Yeah, Dinenu, Reinu, Rabbeinu. Allah, Mashiach, Leil, Vad. So we're coming near a very, very special day of the 22nd of Shevat. Also, in connection with that, and in general, this week's Dvar Malchus is the first Sikha, in my knowledge, that is edited by the Rebbe Malchus that the Rebbe Malchus makes it clear that he's Mashiach. Not only that his father-in-law is the Mashiach of the Rebbe Rayatz, is the Mashiach of the generation, and that we have to understand to mean referring to himself, and he's just always talking about his father-in-law, being that he's the successor of his father-in-law, so we know that he's referring to himself also, that he's the Mashiach of the generation. So, in addition to that, you have in this week's Dvar Malchus the first time that the Rebbe Malchus that clearly differentiates between himself and his father-in-law. That his father-in-law is the preparation connected to the redemption, but Mashiach himself is our Rebbe Malchus, which is clear in the name that the Rebbe Malchus says that the name of the sixth Chabad Rebbe is Yosef Yitzchak, and the name of the seventh Chabad Rebbe is Menachem, which the Gemara says Menachem Shmoi. The name of Mashiach is Menachem Shmoi, and that's what it says in the Sikha. That Miyad is Rosh Tevis. It's Rosh Tevis, just like we had in the generation that left Egypt. We had Mashiach. Of that time, the Redeemer was Moshe, which Moshe and Yeshua was the successor. Next to say here, someone's is the
hello, how are you?
Oh, Yashakaya, wow.
Good. How are you? How you feeling, Rabbi? Last time we met,
Yes. No, it's turned around completely.
You
Can.
moved to a better place. There's no one here. See you.
So
Yeah.
you guys came for wine?
I just come for wine. I have a collection upstairs. And, I was showing my brother lately.
Oh.
What the amenities that we have in this place.
Baruch Hashem,
No,
Baruch
use
Hashem.
it, but it looks nice.
Because they leave the keys inside. I almost feel like using it, and they want $85 a month for the bar.
Nuts.
Yeah, which is stupidest thing.
Right. It's
Oh.
like it's like
Chill.
chill.
Look, it's chill. Look, they leave the keys inside, so it's.
I'm sure if you paid for it, then they would give it to you.
Or if you don't pay it, you lock it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
All right. Do well.
Okay. Yeah.
Yashakaya. Yeah. So we have So again, clear to make everything clear and very simple. The word miyad in Hebrew, the word miyad means immediately, which is a word that the Rebbe Malchus is always using about the coming of Mashiach. The Mashiach is coming, take it from miyad mamish, which is the terminology that the Rebbe Malchus is using constantly, which means in English, take it is about to come, miyad is a right away, and mamish is literal. So it's simply put, it's another way of saying right away, immediately, in the most simple sense. Okay. Now the word miyad is an acronym. The Rebbe says that comes and tells us what it's the acronym for. Okay? The acronym of Miyad is Messiach Menachem Shemai. Messiach, his name is Menachem. Yud, the Yud is for Yetzer Yitzchak, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, and Dalet is Dairom, their generation. Okay? In other words, the coming of Mashiach is a practical thing, and it's in our generation. And Mashiach, his name is Menachem. And this corresponds to how it was in the first redemption that we're studying in the Torah about during these weeks. And that was the leaving of Egypt. And that was also in a way of Miyad. It was Miyad. That Miyad is acronym of Moshe, Yeshua, and Dairon. Moshe was the Redeemer. Yeshua was his successor, his assistant. And the next leader after Moshe was Yeshua, the one that actually took the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. And Dalet is Dairon, their generation, which both Moshe and Yeshua were in the same generation. And likewise, Mashiach, whose name is Menachem, and the Rebbe Ayatz were also in the same generation. And just like the Mem is the acronym for Moshe, the actual Redeemer, Mashiach, his name is Menachem, who's the actual Redeemer. And the Yod is for in that case, it was the one after him. It was after Moshe was Yeshua. And in our case, it's the one before. The Rebbe Ayatz is before. And also after, because there'll be Kitzuran and Shech Ne'ofar, those that were in the dust will arise and sing. We'll have the resurrection. So the sixth Chabad Rebbe will be after. But in simply put, this is a very clear statement of the Rebbe Malchus says they're making it clear that the Rebbe Malchus says there is Mashiach. Now, another thing about an acronym, you have in the next Sikh of Chal Beis Shvat also an acronym, and it says over there that Chamesh is Rosh Tevis of the Rebbitzon's name. The Rebbitzon's name is Rebbitzon Chaim Mushka Schneerson, and if I'm not mistaken, it says in the footnote that it's Rosh Tevis Mashiach also. Actually, it says it's Rosh Tevis Mashiach because it's Chaim Mushka Schneerson and her father Yitzchak. So if I'm not mistaken, it says that in the footnote there. And obviously that's the Rebbitzon, that's the wife of Mashiach. And the way she became, the great woman that she is certainly due to her father and especially due to her husband. Now someone recently brought up something that maybe we can discuss here and see how we could understand this, okay? Because I recently, with Hashem's help, I saw a letter in discussing this, and maybe this is an opportunity to try to understand this, okay? Now, the Rebbe Malchus says that in this Sikha and also in the next Sikha, Mishpatim says that Mashiach is Miyad is Rosh Tevis, Mashiach, Menachem is his name, Yod is Yetzer Yitzchak, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, and Dalet is Duber, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, Shalom Duber. So we're going in the order of generations backwards. Like what's closest to us, not backwards, what's closest to us is Mashiach, his name is Menachem. Yod is Yetzer Yitzchak, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, and Dalet is Duber, the second name of the fifth Chabad Rebbe. Now, someone brought up recently that to tell this, what we just had said now, to someone that's not specifically Chabad oriented, and expect them to accept this as a proof that the Rebbe Shlita's Mashiach is a big jump. In other words, if we want to prove to them that the Rebbe Shlita's Mashiach, we need to use the Rambam. The Rambam is telling us the definition of Mashiach and description. And the Rambam doesn't actually mention any name. The Rambam doesn't say, you know how you'll know who Mashiach is? That his name is Menachem. The Gemara is the source for the name of Mashiach. The Gemara says the name of Mashiach is Menachem. And the Gemara doesn't actually give that much of any other description besides for that. That is his name. And the Gemara says that the place, and there's actually other opinions, but the final opinion, and that's the accepted opinion, is that Mashiach's name is Menachem. It's accepted in later on the works of great scholars, of Arizal, and we find that when they say the name of Mashiach, they say his name is Menachem. And it's mentioned in the Talmud Yerushalmi, and we say every day. So, Tzemach David Avdecha, Tzemach is the numerical. The Talmud Yerushalmi says Tzemach is the numerical value of Menachem.
The Talmud Yerushalmi says that?
Talmud Yerushalmi.
Really?
Yeah, Talmud Yerushalmi says this. So, Mashiach's name is Menachem, but that's sourced in the Talmud. The Gemara says that, the Talmud says that. The Rambam, when he gives a definition and description of how to identify Mashiach, he doesn't mention anything about Mashiach's name. He gives a different description. He says quite an amazing description, which for the simple reading of it, no one else could meet. Like the name, a lot of people have the name Menachem. The description the Rambam gives is much more of a definitive description that no one else can have besides for Mashiach, which that is what we see about the Rebbe. Malchus says that he's a king, he has a royal. I just saw recently, I saw a very interesting sikha, very interesting sikha. I just saw last night or 2 nights ago, that speaking about the Baal Shem Tov, that the highness, the glory, the exaltedness of the Baal Shem Tov was greater than the greatest king. In other words, the majestic nature of the Baal Shem Tov, the kingly nature of the Baal Shem Tov was greater than the greatest king. I saw this in a footnote in the Sikha. Now, this we see by the Rebbe who says the idea of a king. We don't have in our day today, practically for the most part, a non-Jewish king. It's that the Gemara tells us, it's in the halacha, that you should run to see a non-Jewish king. Why? So that you should be able to define what a king is. You should be able to understand what a king is. You could compare, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's hard to do that today because we don't have any kings anymore. But what we do have is the Rebbe Malchus says that the kingly nature of the Rebbe Malchus says that is an extraordinary one in the obedience of his followers. It's just a majestic nature that's very hard to describe. So that's the first thing. It's a king. It's from the house of David, and being a person like David, so we're talking about someone that has humility. What's unique about King David, and that's unique about the Rebbe, Malchus says there is a humility with all the extraordinary qualities and the extraordinary state of position of authority, and still to be of utmost humility. Just a simple example, you see, I think this is what's going on. I didn't hear the words, but you see when you watch a video and you see, we should see, it shouldn't only be a video, we should see the Rebbe says to do it, but Hashem's eyes, because Hashem should open our eyes, but the Rebbe says there's doing it. We should be able to see the Rebbe says the one who's doing it. You can see on video, the Rebbe says that they have, on Lag Baimer, they make a beautiful, this is a very kingly sight. When I saw these videos when I was a teenager, it had a very strong influence on me. That when the parade is going, they make for the Rebbe says that a very kingly podium to stand on. And when the Rebbe says that comes out, they sing on Imam, and we believe in the coming of Mashiach. Now, when the Rebbe says that approaches the bima or the stender, right? Approaches the microphone. The Rebbe says that asks the secretary if that's his place. Every time, if I'm not mistaken, you could see this every time the Rebbe says to ask the secretary if that's where he's supposed to stand.
Wow.
This is like a sense of humility that it's just like beyond. It's a very, very unique. It's a humility that you cannot. It's blitais. It's without blitais. It's just the emes dike humility. The Rebbe says that feels that he's not sure if that's his place. Not that he's not sure. It's hard to express. But the humility expresses itself in a way that we see. I just had the schos. There's a sefer that just came out recently. That I saw it. They put the Tzivos Hashem in Eretz Yisrael, put together all the sichos of their own considered to children. They translate it into Hebrew. They made 2 volumes of it. I think 2 volumes. I just bought it now. And that's a humility. That a person with a great grandeur that the Rebbe says that has, the great ingenious knowledge, the great authority, the great wealth in Svarim that no one could even imagine what type of Svarim the Rebbe says that has, the great wealth of followers, the great wealth of success that no one ever succeeded in having a representative in practically every city in the world, a representative that pledges their allegiance to this leader, that claims to be their follower, that they're willing to do whatever he says, let's hope, right? Everyone's trying to do everything he says. The success, everything you could imagine, and still having the ability to talk to children on their level and dedicate his precious time to talking to children on their level on a steady basis. We're not talking about once a year. We're not talking about we're talking about a few times a year. We're talking about, and in many years, it's more than a few times. It's quite a number of times. Special times, there suddenly calls for a children's rally. There's going to be a children's rally. This is this common request of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe talks to the children on their level, speaks to them on a level that they could understand, and dedicates his time to speak to little children, and is standing and listening to them say the 12 sukkim, and encouraging them and saying the 12 sukkim, and gives them coins to give to tzedakah, to use. And this is extraordinary. That the Barbanel actually writes that this is one of the amazing definitive qualities of Mashiach, that he's able to have amazing qualities which usually are not in the same person. A person can have physical strength, but if they have physical strength, they're usually not that smart. A person that's smart is usually not physically that strong. The Rebbe says that has physical strength, that we had just recently a Sikha, the Rebbe says that the Rebbe Ayatz in his later years, and I actually had the opportunity to hear this from someone that was out of our bringing of the Rebbe Ayatz. I had a teacher in yeshiva, I had a teacher in yeshiva that was by our bringing of the Rebbe Ayatz, and he said, this was like, I don't know how it came up. This was not in a Chabad yeshiva, and he was an older man already. He said it was very hard to understand the Rebbe Ayatz. It was very hard. The Rebbe Ayatz in the later years he spoke very unclearly. Only few people were able to understand what the Rebbe Ayatz was saying. This was for quite a number of years. At the end of especially after the Rebbe Ayatz was imprisoned, and during that imprisonment, the Rebbe Ayatz was tortured to our dismay, and the whole experience was a very terrible experience. Plus, they were very, very, very abrupt, to say the lightest, and anyway, to make a story short, the Rebbe Ayatz's health deteriorated, went down, and his speech was very unclear. The Rebbe Malchus says in that Sikha that in our generation is different. And someone I heard, this is a special friend of mine, he said that we see this by the Rebbe Malchus says that the Rebbe Malchus says that could speak 7 hours straight. The Rebbe Malchus says they speak 7 hours straight. They, with a break of every few hours with singing for a few minutes, but 7 hours straight to speak. And it's not only once in a year. There were years that this was on a weekly basis. The later years, the Rabbeins got shorter, so the Rabbeins are not as long as they were in the early years. But in the earlier years, the Rabbeins, in the later years, it's divided up over the week, because the Elm Sister says a lot of times still it's in the middle of the week. But the Elm Sister's ability to speak is a extraordinary ability. Extraordinary ability the Elm Sister has. So the abilities that the Elm Sister has usually are not all in one person. One person cannot have opposing abilities. And the Abarbanel writes that this is the unique definition of Mashiach. He explains this in his explanation of Yeshaya about V'nachal of Ruach Elikim, that the qualities that the Torah lists are qualities that usually one person cannot have all those qualities. They're opposing qualities. It's not possible for one person to have all of them. So the Rambam's description is these qualities. A person that's very involved in Torah study, in deep Torah study, and is involved in not just for his own benefit, but also benefiting the Jewish people, teaching everyone, and making sure the fulfillment of mitzvahs is being done at the greatest, highest level by every Jew. This is the definition that the Rambam gives of Mashiach. So getting back to what we were saying earlier is that this is a very logical explanation, which is necessary. The Rambam says that people should accept the Rebbe Shlita as Mashiach. They have to accept it in their understanding, which is through studying Torah about Mashiach and Gula. So certainly, this is no question. You got to study, and you study the Rambam's description, and the more we study, the more we'll understand that the Lubavitch Rebbe Shlita is Mashiach. It's so we can put it better. If we want to bring a question as follows: What's the significance of Mashiach's name, and why is it significant to say? Like a very simple, so to say, simple idea that Miyad is Rosh Tevis, the Rebbe Malchus says his name, and this is the way that the Rebbe Malchus says is making very clear that he's Mashiach because he's in this case. It's not just saying his name is Menachem. It's also saying just like it's Moshe, Yeshua, and their generation, it's Mashiach. His name is Menachem, and it's Yud, which is Yesu Yitzchak, the sixth Chabad Rebbe. And it's their generation. And in the next Sikha Mishpatim, it's even clearer because it says in the generations close, in the order of the generations, Mashiach, his name is Menachem, Yod is Yesu Yitzchak, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, and fifth Chabad Rebbe is Duber, the second name of the Rebbe Hashem. So it's much clearer than the Gemara. The Gemara just says his name is Menachem. That doesn't tell us very much because there could be a lot of people with that name. But in this case, when you say that Mashiach's name is Menachem, and then you're already referencing it to who his father-in-law is, so then we're getting a lot more clearer. This is much more clear. The question is, what is the significance of this idea of a seeming, which the Rebbe says that has a letter in Igros Kedesh, that's I found recently, that there's in Bikur, Chicago, the Rebbe Ayatz, a statement over there that the Rebbe Malchus says that writes in the letter. This is a letter that was printed in Kovetz Yagodtai. It was a letter that was publicized. That this statement in Bikur, Chicago, a lot of people had a hard time with it. What did it say there? It said there was a very great chassid of the Alter Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Baruch Mordechai. forget. I think Baruch Mordechai. Anyway, so what did he say? He said, this is a long story, but the statement that he said that people had a hard time with is that Akavia ben Mahalel Eimer, it's a Mishnah, it says Akavia ben Mahalel said, right? And he said, what is the meaning of Akavia ben Mahalel Eimer? Der Piate von a Davener loipt, which means the heel, like Akev means heel of a Davener, someone that davens, Mahalel, he praises Hashem. Loipt, he praises Hashem. And it seemed to be like in the eyes of people reading the Sikha, there seemed to be a very joking, so to say, way of translating Akavia ben Mahalel Eimer. And the Rebbe says that has a whole long thing. It says that this was being said actually to Misnagdim. And it was the Gedolim Misnagdim. If you see the whole story, when you read the whole story there, you see that he said this to very great opposing scholarly Torah scholars, okay, that they were opposing the Hasidic movement. And he said this, it must be that the statement wasn't just a joke. It must have been a very strongly backed statement that this was supposed to be a statement that will take away their opposition and understand, because this was technically I don't remember exactly the story right now, but technically it was like a simple Jew that was really davening. He really put himself in davening, and they like made fun of him that how is this little simple Jew really davening, something like that. I don't remember the whole story, but the question that people had on this was that technically, also like the heel. What are you saying? The heel of a person who davens is praise. What does the heel have to do with anything? Like, so the Rebbe says first and foremost, if the Chassid Baruch Mordechai said this to these great scholars, most certainly there's a very great source. This whole idea must be sourced in the most traditional and steadfast sources, that this will actually give them a change in their perspective. So the Rebbe says they brings over there from Kisrei Arizal. That's actually what he said was sourced in Kisrei Arizal. And in a Medrash, I don't remember right now, that there's a person, explains over there is a Gilgal that has to do with Akev, and like there's a whole thing, everything this whole idea of Akavi ben Mahalel Eimer, that this is all based in Kisrei Arizal, which at that time, and these opposers of Hasidus, they weren't not fluent. They were very fluent in the writings of Arizal. They respected it greatly. The Magen Avraham, which is everyone today is very familiar with the Magen Avraham because of his Seivzman Kriyishma. The Magen Avraham quotes Arizal constantly. Arizal is obviously one of the greatly accepted Torah authorities, and this statement of Akavi ben Mahalel Eimer is all sourced in the writings of Arizal. I don't remember it right now. But getting back to what we were saying, when we're saying that Mashiach's name is Menachem, and it has to do with this acronym of Miyad, and like the Rebbe says that could, if we want to look at it another way. The Rebbe says that could have made, there is a Yechidus that was publicized, there's a Yechidus in Tafshin Chaf Ches, that the Rebbe says that told Rabbi Gutnik that the Shluchim, when the Rambam writes that Mashiach will coerce, he'll so to say force all the Jewish people to go in the way of the Torah, that is through the Shluchim. This is a Yechidus that the Rebbe says the Hadith Rabbi Gutnik. It was publicized in Tafshin on Gimel, this Yechidus. But if we're thinking about it, is there you see it like in Chayesar, you could see it if you want to see it there. You could see, because the Rebbe is talking about Yachol Kol Yisrael, You could see it there, but we could say right now, the Rambam says that could have easily said, let's say, for example, in Yisrael, and said that Mashiach has shluchim who's forcing all the Jewish people, or whatever you want to say, coercing, convincing, Yaakov Kol Yisrael. Keep it simple, right? Getting all the Jewish people to do the Torah. And this is the Rambam's description. The Rambam says that is not saying that. The Rambam says is telling us a definition, like a very clear definition, but this clear definition is based on something that seems to be a cute idea that even maybe a little kid could come up with, right? Miyad is the acronym of Mashiach. His name is Menachem. Yod is the Rabbi Yatz, and Dal is their generation. This is not a person could say, this is not, it's like saying Akavi of Mahalalaymer, the piyata, the heel, the akev of Mahalel, of a piyata, or is it the piyata from Aloiber Zogt? I don't know, maybe, I think that's what it is. The piyata from Aloiber. Mahalel is someone that praises. That's like a child that doesn't, you could say such an idea. It doesn't seem to be a very fundamental idea. Now, about Akavi and Mahalel, the Rambam says that himself, and that this has this simple definition, which seems to be a simple definition. The Rambam says that comes and tells us it's not really a simple definition. It's actually extremely deep definition that's based in Kisrei Arizal. The Rambam says that said that it's in that letter that you see this clearly in Kisrei Arizal, this idea of Akavi and Mahalel. So it must be in our case, l'chaira, it's also that way. Besides the fact that we said earlier, the Rebbe says that it's very much into children. The Rebbe says that it's very much in talking to children. So this is something a child can understand because it's not it's more of a simple, cute idea. So it's certainly also good. It's very important to have simple, cute ideas. It's not a problem. But based on that letter, someone brought this up. Someone said, because it has to do with a certain thing, someone said that these ideas of Miyad being Mashiach, his name is Menachem, and Yod is Yitzchak, and all, these are not things that will convince or will explain to someone that's like a scholarly Torah scholar that's not in that perspective, doesn't understand it yet, it won't give him the message. But it seems from the Rambam says the number one, I saw this letter like very soon after this person claimed this claim. And this letter seems to say otherwise. The Rambam says then the letter is saying that actually these like cute ideas, especially when they're coming, the Rambam says this chassid, if you see from that sicha, this chassid was no simple person. He was a great Torah scholar himself. And if he was saying something, he wasn't saying it stam. And the Rambam says the ends of the letter that this is similarly regarding what the Rabbeim, if Hasidim, this is the way, most certainly regarding what the Rabbeim say. So certainly when the Rambam says they're saying such a statement, obviously it's also very strongly backed. There must be a lot of very deep things in this idea that Mashiach, like we're going to concentrate on this week. It's Mashiach, his name is Menachem. Yod is the Rabbi Yatz, and Dal is Dairam. There has to be certainly a very significant, concrete idea behind it that is backing this. And also the next Sikha, Mashiach is in the Rosh Tevis of the Rabbi Yatz and the Rebbitzon's name, the wife of Mashiach. It must be that these are not just cute remazim, but they must be very deep. The Rebbe says there's just an example. The Rebbe says about a gematria. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think Kislev, if I'm not mistaken. Kislev is gematria 127. Does that make sense? It's 127 minus 1, if I'm not mistaken, right? Kislev, let's see. Kislev is 60, and 20 is 80.
126, yeah.
It is? It's 126 Kislev?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the Malchus says that always Parsas Chaisar comes out in the Mishas of Rachman Chayes Kislev. So it's 126 is plus the koilo, and that's the Chaisar's life was 127 years. But the Malchus this specifically says, I didn't find this in Svarim. The Malchus says, I didn't find this written. Because when I saw somewhere else, the keep it on. Oh, at least anyway. The Rambam says that in other words, and I saw it a different place. The Rambam says there's not so much into Ramazan. Not like the Rambam says that that's more the seat of the Rambam's father. Like Ramazan, like hints, is not so much. There is a place the Rambam says we find even in Torah that the word zeh. No, I don't remember what it is. We do find even in halacha that there are Ramazan, but it's something that the Rambam says is not like so into, so to say. It's not something that the Rambam says then. The Rambam says this, you have to have a Messiah. It has to be also very, when you give a remez, it can't be just anything is remez. There has to be a very strong, firm backing to it. That's the Rambam says this derech. Everything has, if it's a remez, has to be not just stam, anything could technically be a remez. It has to be a very firm, it has to be really true. There has to be a real true backing to it. So let's see, Hashem should help us that we should understand why miyad means this. And why is this like the definition that's going to give us clear that the Dvar Malchus says that is making it clear that he's Mashiach is using this idea. Using this idea. You have any thoughts on the matter? You have any? Listen, I don't want to say that I have at the moment any idea. We could try to understand it. So let's see. The Rebbe says that himself is giving us an idea, and he's telling us it's similar to Moshe, Yeshua, and their generation. Right? So we already have some idea, and we also know that Moshe is greater than Yeshua, right? Moshe says compared to the face of the sun, and Yeshua is compared to the face of the moon. Okay, the Moshe is much greater than Yeshua. It's obvious, right? And they were in the same time. And Miyad, the Rebbe says also adds in the footnote that Miyad, it's like the Rambam had different types of signatures. Sometimes the Rambam signed with letters that were separate from one another, and sometimes the Rambam signed with letters that were all like script, English script, that it's connected letters. The Rambam says this in a footnote in reference to this idea of miyat. So it seems
different things, the different signatures mean different things, right?
Right. So it seems that there's a lot of like very simple but must be deep ideas here. Now a signature, something came up. I don't know what it is, but it's not. A signature is practically speaking, a signature is very significant because it means a lot in the world. A signature means a lot. The Rambam, in his case, when the Rambam would edit us his work and then he would sign it, that means that he gave his approval to this edition of the Rambam that someone copied over. And in general, signature is a very strong statement, right? So a name also must be a very strong statement. A name obviously is very strong. Now the Rambam doesn't mention the name of Mashiach, but the Gemara does. And a name is obviously very strong. It's obviously very, very important and very defined. And this idea of it being immediately, so let's make it simple. Number one, if we want something to be immediate, okay, that means it shouldn't be something that you need to think into and look into, and like a signature. A signature is an immediate thing. To the degree that a person could sign to something and then he could have made a very, so to say, big mistake. Because sometimes you could sign to something that you didn't really think into, but once you sign to it, it's too late. A signature is actually a very miyadike thing. It's a very instantaneous or a very simple, immediate thing. It's something that happens in a moment, and it's also very, 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 what is it?
Powerful.
Powerful, correct. A signature is a very powerful thing. A name is also, like it's wrote in Chassidus, a name of a person Chasson faints, by mentioning their name, they can wake up. A name is, it says the highest of a person comes through the name, and it says, the Rambam says that it's very much into this, that the person's name or the name of a parsha is what describes the content of the whole thing. And when a child is given a name when they're born, it says they have Ruach HaKodesh, they have like a prophecy that what their child will be in their life. And that will show how they're going to be in their entire life. So a name is actually very, very significant. The Rambam does not mention the name of Mashiach. The Rambam has a different, and the Rambam, as it says in the footnote, there's two types of signatures in the Rambam. There's a Rambam signature which is separate letters, and there's a Rambam signature that's one, it's all connected letters. So the Rambam has both. He's a Poisek and also a Mer Nevuchim. It says, if I'm not mistaken, it says that in the same footnote. A Poisek and a Mer Nevuchim are two very different positions. A Poisek is a miyad. He tells you yes, no. There's no explanation. A Poisek, and that's actually the unique quality of the book of the Rambam. The Rambam's Sefer is not like the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. There's no explanations and deep reasons behind it. It's just telling you yes, no, what to do, what not to do. There's no discussion about it. There's no discussions. There's no explanations, no discussions. There's no many opinions. The Rambam is the unique code. It's different than the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, even the regular Shulchan Aruch, has many opinions in it. It's not always easy to know what the conclusion is. You have a whole bunch of opinions. The Rambam has no opinions. Practically very uncommon for the Rambam to bring a second opinion. The Rambam just tells you what to do, what not to do. That's it. Which is the idea of a poisek is more the idea of miyad. The idea of a Mer Nevuchim, and what's a Sefer Mer Nevuchim? The Mer Nevuchim is a philosophy. It's meant to explain to someone that's confused how to get them unconfused. And in order to get them unconfused, it's a lot of work. You gotta work on careful. You gotta work on explaining to them why they're wrong and what's the right perspective. That's a lot of explanation. Now, the Rambam's book of law, when it comes to Mashiach, in a certain way, is more in the psak perspective, obviously, and that's why there's no. I'm sorry. It's the opposite technically, but you can't rule based on a name. You could say because a name would mean that 30,000 people could have the same name. So you're not going to get to it. But the content of the name and the identity of Mashiach and the Rebbe Ayatz, this is a lack of explanation. It's more like a psak. It's just stating a fact. The Rebbe says this is just stating a fact. He's not explaining it. The Rebbe says this telling us that Mashiach's name is Menachem, his father-in-law or his close affiliation to another leader is Yosef Yitzchak, just like Moshe was his, and Yeshua was his, and there's a generation. It's a just a statement. It's like a psak. It's like a miyad idea. It's a miyad. It's not a complicated explanation. It's just that's it. That's how it is. Seems to me what the Malchus is saying. What is more behind it? It's obviously there's a lot behind it, because the Malchus in that letter is saying that it's not just a statement that's a statement, but there is also a lot of meaning behind it. And the Malchus says that the Rabbeim say things, it's like that too. So it can't only be that way, but being that that's the context here is miyad, which is a statement, it's just something you're told and that's how it is. There's no long explanations to it, so that's the idea technically. Is there a deep explanation behind it? Certainly, as long as we're going to try and work hard, we'll come to a better explanation. The more we'll understand maybe what Moshe and Yeshua and their connection, this Pnei Chama and Pnei Levana, there's a deal because they're all says the why it says Pnei Chama, why doesn't it say Moshe's Chama and Yeshua's Levana, why say Pnei Chama? I don't remember the explanation of that. It doesn't mention the Sikha, it mentions in a different Sikha, the Pnei Chama and Pnei Levana. There's a lot that could be investigated, but technically the simple idea is that the Malchus is telling us facts. The Malchus is telling us the fact is Mashiach's name is Menachem. His father was Yesu Yitzchak. There are ayats. And these are facts. We have to know that this is the fact. And the fact is that Mashiach is not on his own. Mashiach is a person, like he emphasizes always, that he is a person with a father-in-law that was a very great person. And the Rambam says that always talks about his father-in-law. In other words, the Rambam says that it's not just a person that stands on his own. He has a great person that he's connected to. And this is one of the strengths that the Rabbi Malchus has. And this connection of the Rabbi Malchus to the Rabbi Yatz is like the Chomesh, the Mashiach, is the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin is the one that connects the Rabbi Malchus to the Rabbi Yatz. So the connection is through the Rebbetzin, and that's why Mashiach is the name of the Rebbetzin plus the Rabbi Yatz. The strength that the Rabbi Malchus has is connected to the strength that the Rabbi Malchus has is connected to the Rabbi Yatz, and it's through the Rebbetzin. Through the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin is a very vital part, strong, fundamental part of all this. And just to think about it, the ability to be the Rebbetzin of the Rabbi Malchus is an extraordinary Mesiras Nefesh. It's an extraordinary to be the wife of a person that technically has no time at all, and dedicating his entire essence to the Jewish people. And obviously, the Rambam says that dedicates time to his wife. It's a known thing that the Rambam says that. But for the most part, it's a big thing, and that is the key that the Rambam says that is connected to the Rabbi Yatz, and what it means practically, and what we need to take from it, because the Rambam says that ends off, and being that we're to emphasize this, and the Rambam says that ends off the Sikha is about 7 days of Sikha, and calling it Beis Chayenu, the house of our life. And the Rabbi Malchus says there's the focus of 7 days of Sikha in connecting us to Torah's Chaim, the Torah of Hashem, and that is the source of life of the generation. So the idea is certainly connected to the Rebbe Malchus Sizda being in the house, because 770 is the building that the sixth Chabad Rebbe purchased and was the first leader there. And the Rebbe Malchus Sizda is the continuation of that and expanding it. And this is the great skills that we have to live in this special time and to have a special leader that realizes that his significance in being Mashiach is a result of his wife and his father-in-law, and being a humble person and being a straightforward person, because humility doesn't mean being a coward. It means stating what's important and correct when it's necessary, and not being afraid of what people might think of you, that you're making a certain statement. And the Rambam says this, taking that stand of making statements that are necessary for us, especially now, to know that the Rambam says that is Mashiach and that his soul is the Beis Chayenu, and that this is the source of life. And as it says in Yisroi, that we need a Moshe that's a human being in the physical world. I saw recently, the Rambam says in a you gotta keep quiet. The Rambam says in a different sikha, it says, it's mentioned in this week's Dvar Malchus. You go to a city, go in its ways. And this the Rambam says is that's why we need Moshe, because Moshe is in this world, and not only is Moshe in this world, but he is involved in the world as a regular person. That's what gives us the ability to bring godliness into the world in a way that's actually permeating our physical life and our physical world, because we have a leader who's in this physical world and he's leading a normal life in the physical world. And every generation we have a Moshe that's giving, just like Noisinat Torah, Hashem gives a Torah. There's also a Moshe in every generation who's giving over the word of Hashem, and he's the one in the world that's an example for us, and giving us the power to be in the world and be involved in the world, and but rather to bring godliness there. Now, recently I saw, you gotta keep quiet. We're almost done. Okay, you gotta keep quiet. The Rambam says that brings this medrash. Azul Karta Halchunamutsa is actually said in the original medrash. It's said about the opposite. Now, when Moshe went up to heaven, he acted like everyone else, and he didn't eat or drink for 40 days. So it says actually in the Medrash the other way. It says that Moshe, when he went up to heaven, he was like everyone else, and he didn't eat or drink. And the Rambam says that takes it and says it the other way, and says that Moshe is even he's going along with the way of our world. Okay, I saw Sikha explaining this. I don't remember right now, but anyway, that's the point here: is that Moshe is in our world and going with the norms of our world, and that's the way that we need to know this. That the Rambam says there's a human being like us and in the world like us. And he's the one that gives us the power to be in the world and be a normal person in the world and bring godliness into that, to make the world a dir of a tachtainim in the most simple sense, that the world and Hashem are one. There's no separation. There's no world or worldly conduct that could chas v'shalom be separate from Hashem. It's all one. And this is the statements that the Rambam says that makes and explains to us at length. Is the sikha about being alive. That's a length, this whole idea. And the fact that the Rosh is Mashiach, this is a statement that we should know And the Rambam says is making these statements and explaining it to us in a way that we could understand it. And Hashem says help. They should already have immediately, that's the content over here. We should see the Rebbe Malchus says that with our own eyes. It takes us out of Galus, and we should have this chus. The moment to immediately go out, that's it. Chia dinenu reinu rabbeinu, no from Shalom Vad. Chia dinenu reinu rabbeinu from Shalom Vad. Chia dinenu reinu rabbeinu from Shalom Vad. Say Chia dinenu reinu rabbeinu. Malach HaMashiach. Leilam Vad.
Very nice.
Wow. To you for arranging all this and for making it happen and for
Pleasure.
bringing us together.